Welcome back to another edition of the City That Never Sleeps show. I'm your host, Brandon Pockris, joined as always by my co-host, Austin Kane. Austin, how are you doing on this fine Tuesday afternoon?
Oh, doing great. Another crazy weekend of sports. NFL's heading into the playoffs this weekend. It's going to be exciting. I'm just ready to get into all of it.
Yeah, we obviously, you know, we had a little bit of a different show last week. Just want to start off with that. The updates on DeMar Hamlin are amazing. The fact that he is off the ventilator, full cognitive function. The fact he's been on social media a little bit. He got transported back to Buffalo. First and foremost, before anything else we talk about here on this show today, that is the most important thing. His health, his safety is by far the most important thing in all the sports world. Not basketball, not hockey, not baseball, not football, not anything. The fact that that is all set is quite honestly the most important thing. And if you guys can't tell, I am in a bit of a different environment today. I am in Florida. I am also wearing sunglasses. And no, it is not just for effect. I ended up losing my original glasses, my normal pair of glasses that are prescription. So this is a little bit of a detour for myself. And yeah, this is this is how I'm gonna have to handle the show a little bit today. So without further ado, I think it's time to get into, the sports news that has happened in the past week and how that's going to impact some things moving forward. And if you guys can't tell, with the question of the day at the bottom, we got the Giants will win a NFL playoff game, agree or disagree. We're going to jump right into it because the New York Giants were playoff bound last week. By virtue of their win over the Indianapolis Colts, they made the playoffs. They rested a ton of starters and they played the Eagles. And quite honestly, the game was not as lopsided as I believed it would be. The Eagles only won by a score of 22-16. This was Jalen Hurts' first game back. On the Giants side, they had Davis Webb starting at quarterback. He went 23 of 40 for 168 yards and a touchdown. On the ground, Davis Webb also had 6 carries for 41 yards and a touchdown. Gary Brightwell led the team with 60 yards on 11 carries. And the leading receiver, ex-Jet Lawrence Cager, 8 receptions for 69 yards. Quite honestly, and this is a very common theme in Week 18 when the games don't always mean as much. The Eagles obviously still had something to play for, considering they were still fighting for the number 1 seed. But on the other hand, the Giants already locked up their playoff spot. They couldn't move up. They couldn't move down. There was no need to risk any injury. We're going to get into that later in the show. A team was in a similar situation, but decided to take a different route. I personally feel that the Giants are primed to potentially pull off an upset. And I feel like that's really the only thing to talk about. There's no need to discuss, how did Davis Webb play? Kenny Galladay's touchdown. It's really all the focus is on the Vikings and the Giants rematch. Because if you guys remember, these two teams played each other a few weeks ago. And the final score of that game was 27-24 Vikings with a field goal that was in the closing seconds. Daniel Jones had a pretty good game, so did Saquon Barkley. But if you remember as well, Justin Jefferson had an insane game, and so did TJ Hawkinson. So I guess the question I'll pose to you, Austin, is heading into this playoff game, what chances do you give the Giants on? And I guess on the other hand, how could you see the Giants losing once again?
Yeah, I mean, I would give it at this moment like a 60-40 chance favoring the Vikings. But with that being said, I mean, they played not too long ago. Like you said, it was a close game, 3-point game. And that was right in the middle of a streak that the Giants had where they started heating up before and after that game. And, I mean, that game showed that they can compete with almost anyone in the league. The Vikings offense, highly powered. Like you said, Jefferson went off. And, I mean, that's got to be their number one idea going into this defensively. You can't let him just beat you. If anyone's going to beat you, can't let it be him. And on the other side, lean on your dogs. Saquon is going to have to feast. He's going to get the ball probably at least 30 times this game to win it. And Daniel Jones is going to have to do his thing, keep it clean in the air. Don't fumble, don't throw a pick. And, use his legs to his advantage, which we have seen him do all season, especially in the past few weeks, to get them into the playoffs. So lean on what got you there. And, I think they can pull this off.
So we got Brian in the chat saying what's up, and he also says, I'm going to have to disagree to the poll. I think the Giants, I think the Vikings have too many weapons for them. Giants don't have the wide receivers. And, in terms of what the poll is asking, I'm going to have to agree. And this isn't a detriment to Minnesota, who I feel is underrated to the point where, everyone's writing them off as, oh, they're frauds, they can't compete. That offense can compete. But the reason I see the Giants winning this weekend and specifically breaking, the Vikings, quote unquote, Cinderella run, Cinderella story, having that type of record with just an absurd point differential that shouldn't seem possible, but it is. I personally just feel like the Giants are a bit healthier than they were the last time they played. Seeing reports that Adoree Jackson might be ready to roll, that would be a huge, huge, huge addition. I'm not saying he stops Justin Jefferson, but that'd be something where the Giants are getting some of their, players back. They got the week of rest for a lot of their starters. If you can get anything out of Kenny Golladay, that's a plus. He showed that he does have some signs of life this past week. But I think what it comes down to me is I trust Brian Daboll's offense to keep up with the Vikings scoring, regardless of the receivers. We've seen this in the past few weeks. And Minnesota's defense is not exactly, world beaters. This is a defense that has been gashed countless times and has given up yards to running backs countless times and even receivers. I mean, I hate being the box score watcher, but, Richie James had 90 yards and Isaiah Hodgins had 89 yards and Slayton had 79 yards the last time these teams played. Like, this isn't some world beater defense. So I guess what my point goes to say is if the Giants can force Kirk Cousins into a few mistakes, if the Giants can, get Kirk out of that comfort zone, maybe hit him a few times, Kayvon Thibodeau coming off the edge, Azeez Ojulari coming off the edge, they can get some of that pressure, turn it up a little bit, and force Cousins into a few mistakes, then I think the Giants are going to win this game. Because I think their offense does more than enough to win. I don't think the Vikings defense is built for this deep postseason run. And essentially, really, that's what it comes down to. It's you have to stop the Vikings offense a few times and ensure that you are taking advantage of a weaker Minnesota defense than a lot of teams that are still in the playoff picture.
Yeah, 100%. You have to take advantage when you have the ball. Can't be giving it back to this Vikings offense and giving them, too many drives and too many opportunities to capitalize and put up points on your defense, where you have to come back in this game. Keep it even throughout. Get a lead, score early. And, what you said, hit Kirk Cousins a little bit, get him uncomfortable, make him throw an interception or two, create turnovers, and you give yourself a good recipe to win this game.
Yeah, it's simple as that. And honestly, score prediction, I'm going to probably go with a 30-28 Giants victory. I think the only way the Giants win this game is if they score. I think Jefferson's going to have another good game. I think Hawkinson's going to have another good game. On the Giants side, I think we see another really good Daniel Jones performance. And on the other hand, you're going to see Saquon Barkley, I think, run for 120 yards. The difference, and I'm calling it now in this game, is going to be 2 Kirk Cousins turnovers. Whether it's a fumble or an interception, I think Cousins going to have 2 back-breaking turnovers because the Giants are healthier and they're able to force more of that pressure on him. That's really going to swing the game in that direction. That's my prediction for it. Austin, where are you leaning in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Giants are going to win this one. I've said before, a few weeks ago that I thought the Giants were going to get into the playoffs, possibly win a game. I still think they're going to score. I'm going to go high scoring as well, like 28, 24-ish area. It's a weird score, but hey, it's a weird game. That's how it goes. What's the key? I mean, Daniel Jones and Saquon, I think they're both going to have to do it on the ground. The Vikings know what's going to come with Saquon. He's definitely getting the ball 30-plus times. He's going to rush for over 100. He'll probably receive for over 50 at least. And give him the ball, let him go to work, and that's how magic's going to happen.
Yeah, I think those are great predictions. And, it's going to be really interesting to see because the Giants are this dark horse team. I'm very happy to say that I nailed that prediction. The fact that from the onset of when the Giants started playing well, I said that the Giants were going to be a dark horse team for a wild card spot. I ended up being right on the money. And I really do think that they have an opportunity to take advantage of, Minnesota. I think they have an opportunity to really win a playoff game, get some of that playoff experience. Now, after that, not feeling too confident about it because after that, you're most likely facing down a San Francisco 49ers team if you advance. But crazier things have happened. So really looking forward to this Giants game this weekend. Really looking forward to, how the defense comes out and plays, how they adjust against an opponent that already beat them. Obviously, same goes for Minnesota. How do they adjust to what the Giants did? But, just to put the Giants season in perspective, they, under new head coach Brian Daboll, have turned around so fast that if you're a fan of that team, I don't know how you're anything but excited for the future. Obviously, still need to add a few more pieces to reach that point where you're challenging a Dallas, a Philadelphia for a division title, when you're challenging for those top seeds in the NFC. But the fact that, you're already in the playoffs when, last year you were picking top 5, it's great. It's great to see.
Yeah, great turnaround. It's only going to keep getting better. Obviously, it's a pretty big offseason for the Giants, but you're not there yet. Still playing. Go get them.
So we got Sean in the chat saying if Giants win, they will play Philly. Seahawks are not beating 49ers. Will be Giants, Philly, and Cowboys at 49ers. So I guess in that scenario, it would be the lowest remaining seed plays Philly. So yeah, it would be Giants, Philly, which, I'm not exactly confident in New York's ability to win that game either. But, division games are crazy. So appreciate that, Sean. We got Rob in the chat as well. He's saying he's going to agree to the poll. Minnesota is struggling on defense all season, especially with mobile quarterbacks and slot receivers. 2 of the Giants' strengths with Jones and Richie James. Then there's Saquon out of the backfield or even in the slot. Exactly. Minnesota does not exactly have this strength on defense. And the Giants do have a very good way of attacking that specific defense. Austin, you got anything else to add on that or no?
No, yeah, 100%. Lean on your strengths. That's what you got to do to win. That's what got you there. And expose the weaknesses of the Vikings and their defense and put up a bunch of points, outscore them.
Exactly. 100%. And, we'll be back next week to discuss everything about this Giants game, whether they win, they lose. So it'll be a very interesting show next week to go over, what's exactly happening and what the future holds for this team. One more comment. We got Kirk Cousins chokes worse than a rookie hooker in big games. Giants by 10 plus. Team's momentum is thriving. Have full defense. That like
Arm me up, Sean.
aside from the hilarious first part of that comment, you're right. The Giants are getting their strength back on defense as the season goes on, and especially by resting their guys late in the game. You're going to have your full front four. You're going to have guys back in the secondary, and that's very important for a team that struggled with Minnesota's weapons in the first matchup. But it's time to move on, and it's time to talk about the other New York team. If you guys still want to leave comments about the Giants, as that is our question of the day, feel free to do so. If you want to leave comments about any other sport, news, story, there's a big one that we're going to get to in a little bit. But the New York Jets finished their season on a very how do I put this? A very disappointing note. Whether you want to look at the last game where they lost 11-6 to the Miami Dolphins, personally, that game didn't really mean anything to me. The season was already over for the Jets at that point. Obviously, everyone's going to come out and say, oh, you still have something to play for. But, quite frankly, the Jets season was over before that. And looking back at the past few weeks, the Jets ended their season on a 6-game losing streak. After a really big win against the Bears, after a crushing loss to the Patriots the week prior, you have the Berrios drop touchdown that could have brought them to 8-4, but dropped them to 7-5. You have the Mike White injuries and barely missing out on beating, the Buffalo Bills for a second time. Then you have the Detroit game where, you have Zach Wilson and he's back and he's missing throws and you end up not winning that game. And then you just get dismantled in your last 2 games before the Miami game, crushing losses to Jacksonville and Seattle. And, it's hard to look at this season. And also, before I get into, looking at it from a wide lens perspective, what are your thoughts on, how the Jets closed the year, on that 6-game losing streak?
I mean, yeah, call it what it is. It's pretty abysmal. I mean, 6 games, if you win 2 of them, you're in the playoffs. Maybe even if you win 1 before the Miami game, you're potentially in the playoffs. Who knows? It just went wrong. They were in a spot they wanted to be far ahead than they thought they would be this season, going into and after the bye. And we said it before. It's hard to look at this and say it was a disappointment and a bad season because they're just so way ahead of schedule. But you were so ahead of schedule that everyone was on the thought, we're making the playoffs. Your defense, even in the 6-game losing streak, didn't play bad at all. I mean, maybe a few plays here and there in some of the games, but nothing that's nitpicking. It's just hard to look at this offense and say that they weren't the ones that failed this team and brought them down completely in the last 6 games because, like I said, if you win 1, maybe 2 of those games, you're playing in the playoffs next weekend.
Yeah, and really, I think that there is a very good avenue to look at this through a nuanced perspective, where on the one hand, this is a team that came into the season not being expected to win any more than 6 games. This is a team that came into the year, this is the building block, and then this is a building block season to establish another foundation, and then you move forward to compete next year. When you start off and pulling up their schedule again at 6-3 and then 7-4 with, teams like Detroit, Jacksonville, Seattle, as good as they ended up being, with the level of talent you assume the Jets had, these seemed like winnable games. Not to mention the Minnesota game or the Buffalo game where you had opportunities to win them. And that's to your point. You win that Minnesota game, there's a shot the Miami game is a winning in. You win Minnesota and Jacksonville, you win Minnesota and Detroit, you're probably in the playoffs already. But the nuanced discussion is because on the one hand, where you broke all these expectations, you're way ahead of schedule, your defense is so elevated. You found absolute superstars in Sauce Garnder and Gareet Wilson and Breece Hall, and you're seeing development from Elijah Vera Tucker, and DJ Reed was a home run signing. On the back half of the year, you see that, okay, our offensive line isn't as good. Okay, our defense is getting a little bit run down. Our offense isn't scoring touchdowns. Our offense isn't moving the ball. We don't have a quarterback. Receiver is a bit more shaky than we thought it was. Our red zone play calling isn't great. The running game isn't existent. We're missing too many throws. Just all these different things popping up in different games, and they all end up costing you. It all ends up snowballing. And truly, hindsight's 2020. The Jets season probably ended after the Detroit Lions game. Because you get that stop on 4th and 1, you tackled the guy before he runs to the end zone, the Jets probably win that game. And instead of being 7-7, you're 8-7 heading into a huge game against Jacksonville. Zach Wilson, his confidence isn't as shot. You're coming off of a win. You're not coming off of a loss. And I really think that's where it ends. But, looking forward, I do think next year has to be a make or break year for this current regime. It has to be, I don't want to say playoff mandate, but this team has to have a winning record at a minimum. You have so much talent. You have your foundational pieces. It's just a matter of supplementing them. You have to improve the offensive line. You're getting Mekhi Becton back, but you can't count on him 100%. You're getting Elijah Vera Tucker back. Who knows what Dwayne Brown does? George Fant probably leaves in free agency. Do you want to rely on Max Mitchell as your starter or have him more of a depth piece? Same thing with Becton. So I think that's why, you're looking towards the draft. You've heard a name already being floated like Paris Johnson from Ohio State in that spot if you follow the Jets and you're, a little bit in the weeds with the draft stuff. But it's not just the O-line. Linebacker. You need another addition minimum there. You have C.J. Mosley, but Quincy Williams is a free agent. Kwan Alexander is a free agent. Those are two guys you'd love to bring back, but you need another addition on top of that. Safety. You need an upgrade over LaMarcus Joyner at a minimum, maybe 2 new safeties. Wide receiver, potentially a guy to replace Corey Davis. Edge rusher, more depth, maybe a guy to replace Carl Lawson. And then the most important thing, quarterback. Because and this is truly how I feel. A lot of things fall into place if you have a quarterback. I think the play calling, I think the receiver production, I think the O-line gets a little better if you make the right pick at the quarterback position. It doesn't fix everything, and you do need to have a strong offseason. But getting the quarterback pick right is so important that if the Jets miss on that, you're probably looking at a new GM and a new head coach next offseason, heading into the 2024 season. So that's really where I stand, truly, with the Jets situation. I am more optimistic than I have been in years past in terms of looking at where they are, but it is undeniable once again. And I, feel like it's like deja vu saying this over and over and over and over again. But this is a make or break offseason for them. They have to get so much right that they should have gotten right, but they haven't. Like the O-line, like safety, like linebacker. Like it's like saying the same things over and over again, but it's the truth. It's a make or break offseason for this current regime. And I want to see Saleh and Douglas stay here because I think they have done a good job. But at the end of the day, you know, the results are the results. Saleh and Douglas are only a few games better than, what Gase was. And yes, the optics are 100% different, but you are where your record is at some point. So I think that's truly what it comes down to.
Yeah, very big offseason. I mean, I think the biggest key here, you got to get super healthy as you can. Vera Tucker, Becton, like you said, can't fully count on him yet. He's been hurt all the time. Brees Hall, I think once he went down, and Vera Tucker in like the same game, then that kind of killed the whole offense for the year. And then all over on the defense, linebacker, edge, deep safety. And quarterback, the biggest position in, I guess, all sports, you could say. Definitely an argument, if not definitely the biggest position in all sports. I don't think the answer is in the draft at all. We've seen the way Jets quarterbacks have developed so far in the past decade. Not that great out of the draft. I think it's free agency or trade. There's a bunch of options out there. I mean, we're going to go over them some point as the offseason continues. Off the top of my head, Carr, I'm sure will be off the Raiders. Lamar trades have been rumored. They gave big contract out today, and it wasn't him. So we'll see what happens with that. Jimmy G's guy we liked throughout the season. And there's a bunch of teams that need a quarterback, but the Jets, go get the best one that you can.
Yeah, so to that point, Austin, what do you think an ideal quarterback is for them? And then at the same time, what do you think a realistic option is for them?
I don't know how much Douglas is going to throw at him, but I would love Lamar on the Jets. I just think it would be an awesome fit, an awesome look. This young team surrounded by this young core and this young team, be electric offense with a great defense, especially he can add the mobility and run for over 100 yards a game to be massive. Realistically, I guess I would have to stay with Jimmy G or Derek Carr. Definitely going to be a little cheaper than Lamar. Probably, we'll see what the Raiders do with Carr, but definitely a little cheaper and more, I guess, realistic, you would say.
Yeah, so I think for me, I'm truly in the sense of the Lamar Jackson trade, and despite what some people are saying, which I think is just crazy, if he becomes available, you do everything in your power to get him. Whatever assets, whatever contract he wants, you give it to him. Because you got to remember, the Jets have not had a quarterback throw for more than 10 touchdowns in 3 seasons, which is ridiculous in the modern NFL. Lamar Jackson is a former MVP. He is still an MVP level player. If he is available, you go after him. Same thing with Aaron Rodgers, in my opinion. I think he'd be great here as well. I truly think it comes down to we don't even know all the names that are going to be out there. What if a Justin Fields becomes available, as unlikely as that is? What if a Dak Prescott becomes available? We talk about right now, it is December 10th. At this time last year, we didn't think Tyreek Hill was getting traded to the Dolphins. We didn't think Devontae Adams was getting traded to the Las Vegas Raiders. Stuff in the NFL is crazy. Things happen. So, evidently, at this point, we don't know what all the options are going to be. We know Carr is going to be one. We know Garoppolo is going to be one. There's a possibility of Rodgers. There's a possibility of Lamar. And then you want the lower tier, maybe a Tannehill, a Brissett, a Minshew, those type of players. So obviously the pipe dream is Lamar. I think the realistic option is truly Jimmy Garoppolo. And no, I'm not the biggest fan of that. I'm not the biggest fan of Jimmy in terms of the fact that he's been injured a lot. He if he gets hurt, you're back to the same scenario of, okay, are we playing Mike White? Are we playing Zach Wilson? And I think that as risky as that is, the Garoppolo is the realistic option because he has experience in the offense. He knows LaFleur. He knows Saleh. And I truly think the Jets will go after him. I'd prefer Carr over Garoppolo just because of a little bit more durability. But then again, how does Carr handle the New York market? And then you go to that lower tier. Can Tannehill even sustain a full year? Is Brissett just your holdover until the next draft class? Is it the same thing with Minshew? And then you have the wild card with okay, if Anthony Richardson or CJ Stroud are in range, do you draft one of them and have them as your developmental guy and then try to recoup assets for Wilson? I see that as highly unlikely, but we've seen everything happen in the NFL. You can't really rule anything out. Do Douglas and Saleh view drafting another quarterback as a way to get maybe possibly another year? These are the type of things that can happen in the NFL. But I do think the Jets are going to do everything in their power to get the quarterback position right because jobs are on the line. And quite frankly, the best work tends to happen when pressure is applied. But I don't know what the result's going to be. I do think they add another safety. I think they make a decent amount of changes on the offensive line. I think they add to the linebacker, receiver, and maybe the edge position. But quite frankly, as we saw this year, nothing matters unless the quarterback position is fixed. Nothing matters unless you have that guy at the position. Unless you have 5 all-pros along the offensive line, you're going to have a bit of shakiness or not above average play. Unless you have superstars at every receiver position, you're not going to have, above average play at every single spot. The quarterback play is what tends to sustain or sometimes even elevate the different places on the roster. And the funny thing is, you get quarterback right, I bet the defense is even better because they're able to play with the lead. They don't have to, play from behind or tied every single possession of every single game. It's remarkable, to be quite honest with you, that the Jets only allowed 11, 23, and 19 in their last 3 games, considering the fact that they did not score an offensive touchdown in those games, considering the fact that they only scored, at this point, what would it be? 12 or 15 points total in their last 3 games. Things change in the NFL from year to year. You're not going to have the same injury luck on defense. You're not going to have the same injury luck with your skill positions like Gareet Wilson. But you have a better quarterback, a better guy at that position, things become much easier to manage. So I think that's really what it comes down to right now. We have such a long offseason to discuss everything. But at the end of the day, the Jets have to get that quarterback position right, and a lot of other things are going to fall into place. Specifically, in my eyes, improvement at offensive coordinator, improvement in terms of scoring points, and improvement of the overall roster. You don't figure any of that out until you have quarterback right.
Yeah, 100%. Huge offseason. QB, definitely top priority. Have to get it right because your team will not progress if you do not. And let's see.
Well, to move on, you want to get into a bit of a more wide-ranging NFL discussion?
Yeah,
playoffs?
let's do it.
Mad Bull, I'm seeing a lot of your comments, specifically hockey related, but we are on football and at the moment, and I see your comment. Coach Mike Tomlin is the GOAT, and he is finally free at Big Ben. He has his quarterback one with Kenny Pickett. Look out, Steelers are great
Let's
again.
go, Mad Bull. Let's go. Kenny frickin' franchise. He's going to be a beast. We are going to be back, and we will never be bad. We will never be bad. In my time of watching football, I think we've had one losing season, and I was like not even a year old, so I wasn't even watching football. It's awesome being a Steelers fan. We're always in it to the left. Tomlin is the GOAT. He's coached one game that we've been eliminated from the playoffs. Nobody else is saying that. Mad Bull, we are back. See you next year. I'm excited. We have studs all around. Big improvements coming. Big off season. Let's go. Number 7 coming soon.
You know, if I didn't know any better, I would have thought that this was Austin's burner account. But since I know he's on his phone today, I know I know that's not possible. But you know, I think that's a good place to start because, good Lord, is Mike Tomlin still the most underrated coach in the NFL? I think so. I don't think it's particularly close either.
By our own fans too. Everyone wants him gone. I mean, it's hard to win this damn league. He does it every year. We started 2-6, ended 9-8 with a shot to go in. Screw the Jets, but yeah, he does it every year. It's impossible to stop. He's like a wizard, and our own fans hate him. It doesn't make sense. I love Coach Tomlin. Keep him there forever.
No, he's incredible. The fact that he gets that much out of his roster, especially with the type of year the Steelers were having and still managing to have an above 500 record, pretty impressive. Also, Steelers would not have had to rely on the Jets if they didn't lose to them earlier in the season. So I don't want to hear that out of you.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, you don't lose to the Jets, guess what? You're probably in the playoffs. So that sucks.
Next year.
Yeah, but you know, I think it's as good a time as ever to shift towards, you know, looking at the scores from this past week, there's not really much that had a huge bearing on, you know, playoffs. Obviously, you have the Jaguars defeating the Titans. That was a huge game. Trevor Lawrence in the playoffs facing off against Justin Herbert. Obviously, the Steelers game, Bengals dismantled the Ravens. Yes, the final score was 27-16. Wasn't even that close. Vikings, Bears, we'll get to that one. I guess there were some storylines, but I feel like so many of it was more like draft related or just coaching malpractice, to be quite honest with you. Like it was either like, you know, okay, but Buffalo, incredible story. Naheem Hines, 2 kickoff return touchdowns to really just an incredible scene of events, to be honest with you. And the Bills defeat the Patriots. Knocks the Patriots out of playoff contention. You know, we obviously talked about Dolphins because of the Bills beating New England, Dolphins winning. Dolphins make the playoffs. They're now playing Buffalo once again. But I think the most important story outside of the Bills, because, you know, incredible that Damar Hamlin is recovering as he is. Incredible to see the Bills come out and play that way after those events. I think the biggest story is really twofold. Coaching. And there's 2 levels of coaching. Coaching malpractice and coaching when you know you're fired. So, to start with malpractice, good Lord, Brandon Staley, what are you doing? I don't know what to say in this regard because, number one, the Chargers were already locked into a playoff seed the week before. The fact that he came out and played all of his starters for that period of time, got Mike Williams hurt, got Joey Bosa hurt, you know, what are you doing? Like, I truly don't understand. And I get it. Oh, you want to keep your guys, you know, locked in with the speed of the game and not be behind the 8 ball when it comes to the playoffs. But why? It's the NFL. You're asking for issues in that case. Look at what the Giants did. They rested all their important starters, all their important players that they need for a playoff game that they're already guaranteed for. Brandon Staley, I don't know what you're doing. I truly don't.
Yeah, a team that's been through the injury ring a lot this year, all over the place. No need to get an extra game in. Your teams, your professionals, you can get yourself ready the week of or the 2 weeks going up into this playoff game that you're locked in and you can't move out of. So it makes no sense. Definitely the wrong move, especially seeing a few of your top guys go down. 2 guys that are going to be big if you want to advance in this gauntlet that the NFL playoffs is. So, yeah, definitely bad move. Definitely not the right decision there.
Exactly. And like when you have a guy like Mike Williams that is dealing with injuries constantly, when you have a guy like Austin Eckler that takes so many carries week after week after week, just why? Just why? Like that it's like a one-word answer. Why? Why are you? And this could have huge ramifications because it's not like you're playing some, pushover team. You're playing a Jacksonville Jaguars team that has been locked in and rallied and made this push and overtook the Titans to win the AFC South. This isn't going to be a pushover game. So if the Chargers lose to Jacksonville this week, a lot of people are going to be looking at Staley's decision-making in Week 18 as a main culprit of why they lost that game. And then on the other hand of coaching, Lovie Smith, man.
Savage.
Yeah, and this is gonna tie nicely into our next segment talking about, the playoff picture and the coach firings. But man, how about Lovie Smith giving the double birds on his way out to the Houston Texans organization and costing them the number 1 overall selection by defeating the Indianapolis Colts in Week 18. And this was just incredible how it happened because the final touchdown was what was it with 50 seconds left?
Yeah.
A 28-yard Hail Mary from Davis Mills, and then they get the 2-point conversion, which was another Jordan Akins catch. I mean, how about that, Lovie? And you want to talk about organizations that don't know how to be run. I mean, the Texans firing 2 head coaches in the span of 2 years, really third if you count Bill O'Brien's firing, both of which are, I mean, it's just a terrible look on all fronts. The fact that you hire essentially 2 African-American head coaches, people that we see it all the time. They don't get the necessary interviews. They don't get the necessary, opportunity. You hire 2 of them and fire them a year apiece. Like, well, like I don't understand. Is this just your cover to hire Josh McCown as your head coach? Is this your cover to just, the Colts hired Jeff Saturday. We can just hire whoever we want now. Pull another ESPN analyst out of the booth. Like, but like, it's just like that. It's just the marks of a incompetent organization that you're letting a GM hire a 3rd consecutive head coach.
Yeah.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Want to go coach there? What real coach is going to say, all right, instead of going to place A, I'll go to B, which is the Texans, who has fired 2 guys in 2 years, and I have nothing to really build off of because, look, I'm not saying the Texans got any better this year, but what do they really have?
I mean, but like that's the crazy thing. They do have pieces. They do have 2 good tackles. They do have Damian Pierce. They do have, some underrated wide receiver 3 type weapons. They had Derek Stingley. Like, they have pieces there. And they're not as far away from being fully rebuilt as I think a lot of people think. But it's still malpractice to just treat your head coaches in this manner.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems unprofessional, not being run correctly. Give a guy a shot, maybe 2 years at least. Like, I mean, you committed to him, he committed to you. Come on, it's got to be something there. But yeah, there's not doing it right.
Yeah, and obviously Lovie Smith, they didn't even wait until Monday to fire him. Your other head coach openings, you obviously had the Colts. The interim with Saturday, they said they might give him, a shot to interview. I feel like that should just be the common courtesy, but there's no way they should hire him. The Cardinals fired Cliff Kingsbury, nailing that prediction, although I said it would be in the middle of the season. I just did not see that panning out. They need to blow it up. We look at Tankathon. The Cardinals have the number 3 overall pick in the draft. That's going to be huge for them in terms of the rebuild. The other head coach firings, you obviously had Denver. I'm pretty sure that's about it, right? Obviously, Carolina opened up as well.
Open. Yeah, I believe so off the top of my head. Well, I mean, maybe there's still more to come. We'll see. But
yeah, and then obviously you have the under the radar firings, like the Titans fired their offensive coordinator. The Cardinals GM slot also opened.
I think Washington wiped everyone out, or like on offense or something.
Yeah, but there's not too many quote unquote openings at the moment. Obviously, you're seeing Jim Harbaugh linked to Denver. You're seeing Sean Payton linked to Denver. Harbaugh possibly to Indy. You also had the Houston opening with Shane Steichen or Jonathan Gannon. It's going to be very interesting to follow how the head coaching hirings get distributed, and then there could be some wild cards. Obviously, we mentioned the Chargers. Do they fire Brandon Staley if they completely flame out and get all that flack from the Week 18 decisions? Do the Jets fire their offensive coordinator? How does that work? Do they fire some other people on their staff? There's always the possibility of surprises to happen. And if the NFL in the past few years has taught us anything, is to keep us on our toes. As much as the head coaching hirings, which, trust me, we will get to once the full offseason hits, along with, and I'm on my transition game today, the NFL playoffs. So looking at the bracket at the moment, we got the AFC. We have the 5-seed Chargers playing the 4-seed Jaguars. We got the 3-seed Bengals hosting Baltimore Ravens. And we got the Buffalo Bills hosting the Miami Dolphins. On the NFC side, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers playing the Dallas Cowboys. The New York Giants playing the Minnesota Vikings, as we mentioned earlier. And the San Francisco 49ers hosting the Seattle Seahawks. So it is time to give our predictions for the NFL playoffs, game by game, from this weekend all the way up to the Super Bowl. Austin, I'm going to start with you. From the AFC side, what do you have for the first weekend? And if you want to continue after that, go ahead. If not, we can go weekend by weekend.
Yeah, on the phone, so I don't have it in front of me, so you're going to have to piece me up. But start with Baltimore and Cincinnati. I think that game's fully going to depend on Lamar. Hasn't practiced in over a month. I mean, just at this moment, going to have to give that one to the Bengals. Then we got Chargers, Jaguars. I mean, I think really the only way that Chargers can completely lose this game is if they beat themselves, which, they kind of have a knack for. I don't think it's going to happen this time. I think they show up. Herbert's going to show up, have a good game, and this offense is going to get going into this playoffs. So I'll get the Chargers to that one. And what is it? Bills, Dolphins. I don't see the Dolphins or the Bills losing any time in the first round in the next couple of years. So I'm going to give that one to the Bills. Should we jump over to NFC?
I'll give my AFC weekend predictions first.
Yeah.
So I'm going to deviate from you in the first game, the Chargers Jacksonville. So much of football, sports, really anything, especially when it comes to playoff time, is when you get hot. The Jacksonville Jaguars have got hot at the right moment. The Chargers have not. I got Jacksonville not upsetting because they're technically the higher seed, but I guess upsetting the Los Angeles Chargers. And, I think Jacksonville moves on. In the second game, the Bengals-Baltimore, I think it's a blowout. Obviously, this is predicated on Lamar Jackson's health. We do not know the status of that at the moment. I got Joe Burrow and company rolling right over Baltimore. I don't think it's close. I think we get some crazy Lamar Jackson news after that game, considering the result I'm predicting. So you got the Bengals moving on. You got the Jacksonville Jaguars moving on. And then, look, unless the Miami Dolphins decide to commit medical malpractice and put Tua out there, when he obviously should not, there's no way the Buffalo Bills are losing to Skylar Thompson or Teddy Bridgewater. I don't care that they have Tyreek Hill. I don't care that they have Jalen Waddle. We saw what Teddy Bridgewater looked like this year. He's a good quarterback. He can handle, manning the offense for a little bit. I don't have confidence in him outdoing playoff Josh Allen. So that moves us to the second weekend, which would have, if we go about it this way, the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Cincinnati Bengals, because the Chiefs that'd be the Chiefs taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Bills taking on the Bengals in a rematch of the game that got postponed due to the DeMar Hamlin situation. So I think now looking at the NFC, I'll start off. We did not cover this game, but the alarm bells were ringing for me last weekend for the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm very concerned about Dak and their offense right now. I'm not saying Dak isn't good. Trust me. There's just something off there for me. And keeping that in mind, playoff Brady scares the ever-living daylights out of me. And I see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers upsetting the Dallas Cowboys. Could be wrong here, obviously. But seeing how Brady performed in a do-or-die and this was the most important thing for me, seeing that the Mike Evans connection was reestablished, even in a game where they were facing tight coverages, even in a game where they were facing, a tougher defense. Carolina has a decent secondary, and I know those touchdowns were miscommunications, but even when those throws were open earlier in the year, Brady was not hitting them. The fact that Brady was hitting them, I have confidence in Tom Brady getting another playoff win and defeating the Dallas Cowboys, opening up a very fun offseason for that team. I have the Giants defeating the Vikings. And then, look, as fun of a story as Seattle has been this year, the 49ers are legitimately, I think, the best team in these playoffs. Sorry, Eagles fans. And I don't think this game is close.
Yeah. So you finish up your NFC? I kind of cut out there.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So for me, Bucks Cowboys. I potentially could be in the house that night. I'll be rooting for the Bucks, but looking into it as on here. Brady in January, dangerous, playoff Brady. He's never lost to the Cowboys. I would like to say that's going to keep happening, but I really just don't think the Bucs have it. This year it's been really tough on them. They finished with a losing record, and just haven't looked good all around. So I'm going to do the Cowboys that one. I think they're going to figure it out and get through the next round. Next game, Giants Vikings. I had the Giants moving on in that one, and the third one is Niners. And Niners playing Seattle. They just beat them up real bad, kind of a few weeks ago. I could see that happening again. This time it's in San Francisco, not Seattle. So Seattle won't even have the 12th man behind them. That being said, I think 49ers I almost have to agree. Best team in the NFC. I'm not really sure. It's a toss-up between them and the Eagles. I've seen the Niners advancing with ease.
All right, so that brings us to the second round of the playoffs. You got the Chiefs taking on the Jaguars. As much as I love a Cinderella story, I don't think it's close. I think the Chiefs defeat Jacksonville handedly. Buffalo taking on Cincinnati. I think I would have leaned Cincinnati earlier in the year, but considering this would be a rematch and it would be in Buffalo, I think the Bills come out playing like their lives depend on it. Playing like this is basically the last game like ever. Like I think the fire that the Bills would play with in that game would be unmatched beyond anything we've seen in recent playoff memory. And I think the Bills advance to take on the Chiefs. On the NFC side for me, I think that the Bucs, as fun of a story as it would be to see the last hurrah of Tom Brady, I think the Eagles shut them down in their tracks. I think the Eagles defeat Tampa, and the Eagles defeat the Giants, which would mean the 49ers play the Buccaneers, keep mixing up that playoff seed. I guess I think the Giants are higher than they are. I don't think it's close. I think the 49ers dismantle the Giants as well. I don't think the Giants have the horses to compete with the 49ers in a playoff game.
Yeah, so for me on the other side, AFC would be Chargers Chiefs, because I picked Chargers to win the first round over the Jags. Divisional game, anything can happen, but before the year, my prediction was Chiefs winning the Super Bowl. I don't think the road stops there in the divisional round for them. I think they'll move on to the conference chip. Other game would be Bills-Bengals. I'm with you. I don't see Bills losing that game. Rematch, game we're all looking forward to if it comes. And I do think the Bengals run would end there with the Bills, and we'd get Chiefs-Bills AFC Championship, which I think would be in a neutral site. All this rule stuff is confusing me, so I'll hop over to the NFC. We got what would I have? Giants-Eagles in the next round, right? Because they'd be the lowest seed. I don't see the Eagles winning that game, or I don't see the Giants winning that game. As cool as it would be for us here, but I think the Eagles would move on to NFC Championship, and then they would face the winner of Niners-Cowboys, which, once again, Niners are one of the best teams at NFC. We would get Eagles-Niners in the NFC Championship.
Yeah, so NFC Championship, Niners, Eagles for me as well. Just a little bit different of a route getting there. I have the Niners obviously defeating the Buccaneers and the Eagles defeating the Giants. As fun as it would be for a lot of fans, Philly fans listening to the show, I think the 49ers defeat the Eagles. I just think that the 49ers have not necessarily the weapons, but the defensive scheme to shut down the Eagles' offense. I also think the Eagles have the potential to shut down the 49ers' offense. So I think that game is a back and forth beyond belief, and I think the Niners eke it out late fourth quarter win to advance to the Super Bowl. In the AFC, I got as much as I love Mahomes and the Chiefs, I think the Bills have this team of destiny vibe. now in the AFC, and I think they advance to the Super Bowl to take on the 49ers, in which would be an absolutely incredible matchup. And just to finish it off, I'm going with the Buffalo Bills breaking the drought, breaking the curse, and winning their first ever Super Bowl. And finally, breaking the curse of the wide left, and all the Jim Kelly years against the 49ers team that they did lose to the Super Bowl against one of those years.
Yeah, for me, Chiefs Bills. As hard as it is, I think I'm going to stick with my prediction that I made in the beginning of the year because, I mean, once you make one, you just kind of got to ride it out. And I think that game is a shootout no matter where it is or who's playing. I mean, Chiefs Bills, guys going to be slinging the ball. Two of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen. Two of the best arm talents we've ever seen. It's going to be a shootout. Ball's going to be flying. But I will give the Chiefs squeaking that one out. And then on the other side, I think the Eagles just have enough where they can get by them on both sides of the ball. It's a bunch of star power on that field, so it could really go either way. There's two of the best teams in football. That's why they'll be playing in that game. But I do have Philly winning that one. And then to wrap it up in the Super Bowl, I can't let the Eagles win. So the Chiefs. And, got to write out the prediction. Chiefs will win that one. Score, I have no idea.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our NFL talk. Austin, I know you need to head out. Or do you need to head out now, or you got a little bit more time?
I have to dip.
All right. Well, we will see you next week, Austin. And
yes, sir. Been a pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Brandon's going to take care of the second half of the show. Stick around. You got it, Brandon.
All right. Catch you later.
Peace.
All right, guys. So it is me riding out the remaining hour on this show. So you guys have any comments on anything regarding football still? I'll make sure to get to them. You guys have any comments regarding, basketball, football, hockey, any news that you've seen come across, just feel free to fire it in there. We're kind of just going to, cover some topics, discuss some things, and kind of just ride it out to the end of the show. Before we get on to that, though, I want to remind you guys that Creative Window Design Center, serving New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Florida. They're a fully authorized Hunter Douglas dealer. If you want a free consultation, contact Jeff at 609-226-0391. Also, All Campus is giving 20% off everything in their store, including hats, shirts, to all their subscribers. So make sure to get in on that. We were talking about the NFL still, talking about, the playoff picture. We gave our predictions on what we think is going to happen. I personally feel like the Bills rallying behind, Damar Hamlin, make the Cinderella run, even though they are one of the best teams in the league. I think they have, an incredible run to the Super Bowl, and I do think they finally get it. We talked about, this different head coach openings. Obviously, that's going to be more down the line because a lot of these head coach openings are going to be filled possibly with, coaching staffs that have guys in the playoffs still. Talk about the Giants, how we think they are going to upset the Minnesota Vikings, and we talked about the Jets and, their outlook towards the offseason. Obviously, as we move forward throughout January, February, we're going to take a long look at the draft and what the Giants could do, what the Jets could do. As it currently sits, the Jets are locked into their 13th overall selection. Over the course of the draft, they will have their first pick at number 13, then 44, 75, 112, 144, and they have Houston's pick in the 6th round at 178. For the Giants, as they currently stand, they would have the number 23 overall selection. Obviously, because they are still playing, that is not solidified. In the chat, we got Don. What's up? What's up, Don? Your Lions had an excellent finish to the year. Very impressive to see where that organization is heading. And then we got Jinx in the chat evening. evening to you as well. Glad you are swinging by the show for tonight. With all the football talk, I think it's finally time to move forward to baseball. And, some crazy news happened today. Some crazy news was broken today. Because the New York Mets, if you guys have been following, apparently came to terms with Carlos Correa about 3 weeks ago. And then the medical issues popped up. And now he didn't sign with the Mets. He is now heading back to the Minnesota Twins, something that seemed, quite frankly, unfathomable at the start of free agency. As of 12/21 today, Correa and the Twins agreed on a 6-year, $200 million contract, a vesting option that can max out at $270 million pending a fiscal. We got Jinx again in the chat saying, believe in Dan Campbell. That team plays their asses off for him. They absolutely do. Personally, as someone that, follows the team very closely in the AFC, I absolutely love what the Lions are building. I see some similarities and some even improvements on what teams like the Jets have done, Jacksonville has done. I love the culture they're building. I think Campbell is going to have that team in the playoffs next year. That's a prediction that's a hill I'm willing to die on. I think the Lions are a playoff team next year, and I think they have a very good shot at challenging for that NFC North, considering, the up-in-the-air status of the Packers, the Bears still rebuilding. And, as good as the Vikings were, they fluctuated a lot. Their point differential was not of a team that had that many wins this season. But back to baseball. Correa, it's a very interesting situation with how that was handled. Because first, March 22nd, 2022, Correa agrees to a 3-year, $105 million deal with the Twins. That was for last season. Then you have Correa opting out. He agrees to a 13-year, $350 million deal with the Giants. Okay. Then the fiscal comes up, the ankle issue. And at first, everyone thinks that this is a team that, they just don't want to pay Correa this money. They don't want to do that. And then the Mets swoop in. On December 21st, 2022, Correa agrees to a 12-year, $315 million deal with the Mets. And at this point, Steve Cohen, he's throwing around the big bucks. This is the final piece. He goes to the media and says this, right? He says all this, and he, essentially goes out there before the fiscal is done. And then the same issue pops up for the Mets. They have an issue with Correa's ankle. And, okay, what's the deal with this ankle? Well, this is an issue that apparently has been, quote-unquote, repaired. He had a surgery back in 2014. But teams such as the Mets and Giants were very concerned about the long-term stability of it, especially over the duration of 13 or 12 years. So the Mets flagged it. The Mets tried to rework the deal. And I guess what it comes down to is Scott Boras just has this thing where he just refuses to renegotiate. He refuses to go back to the drawing board. Once those terms are agreed to, he just doesn't renegotiate. And there is, obviously arguments on both sides of the aisle. Oh, the Mets dodged the bullet here. The Mets, avoided paying all this money. And then you have other people where it's like, oh my goodness, how could the Mets let him walk? This was the final piece. We're doomed. We're a third place team. And I personally fall a bit more into that first camp where, if the issue was so bad that Steve Cohen was not willing to, quote unquote, outbid, which If he wanted to, he would have. But he wasn't willing to go beyond what the Twins were offering. He wasn't willing to pay all this guaranteed money. He wanted, as some reports have indicated, Correa to take a physical every single year of that deal in order for the money to be guaranteed. If the Mets, with the richest owner in baseball, are willing to walk away and not pay that money, I personally, from his track record, am willing to say they are making the right move. But that's never 100%. Correa could come out this year, hit 40 home runs, and make every Mets fan be like, damn, imagine if we had that on our roster. That's very possible. It's also very possible Correa gets hurt, the Twins are stuck with the contract, and Mets fans are happy by having Brett Beatty, who, by the way, was one of the highest and is one of the highest ranked prospects in all of baseball, manning the hot corner for them. My full opinion on this situation is that while it's not disastrous, it's still not great. It's not great that your owner comes out, says the deal's done, and then the deal doesn't get done. But on the other hand, you're happy that you have an owner and people that are in the baseball operations department and the GM and whoever you want to name that are cognizant enough to be like, hey, we can't give all this money if he's damaged goods, if he's going to be hurt, if he can't hold up for the duration of the contract. So it's a give and take here. The give, the Mets lose out on a bat that would have drastically helped their team in the present this year. Would have probably taken them over the top, made them the number 1 or number 2 contender in the NL. On the flip side, the Mets aren't paying $300+ million to a guy that could be damaged goods. You have that money to, as a report said, possibly go after Manny Machado. Possibly go after Shohei Ohtani next offseason. Go after Juan Soto. There are options, there are variables, there are different things. It's not the end-all be-all that the Mets didn't sign Correa. By no means of the imagination. But at the same time, they do need another bat. They do need to make another addition to their lineup. Steve Cohen said as much. So the problem now is, where do the Mets go from here? Do they pivot to a Brian Reynolds, who I think would be a great addition, but are you gutting your farm system to trade for Brian Reynolds? Depending on what Pittsburgh's asking for, I'd rather trade that for Ohtani. I'd rather try to get Machado now. If you're trading those type of prospects for Reynolds. Are you adding another depth option like an Adam Duvall? Are you adding another guy that can just be a supplement to your lineup and letting Brett Beatty develop? Because, you got to have the balance. You got to let the prospects play and develop. And if you really want to become the East Coast Dodgers, you have to do that. But at the same time, you also need to have that insurance where, let's say one of the prospects doesn't work out, you have another bat so that you don't have the issue at the end of last year where you have a gaping hole in the bottom of your lineup. So it's a very fine line for the Mets. It always is. It always is for every organization. But what it comes down to is, how do they respond from this and hopefully not overreact to this? It's going to be very interesting to see. Haven't been too many other leaks about what the Mets are doing, what they want to do, what they're thinking about. So if Steve Cohen has proved anything, he will do whatever it takes to win. What that move is now that Correa is not a part of the Mets, remains to be seen. And quite frankly, it's going to be something we follow very closely on here. It's going to be something we follow very closely for the remainder of the offseason, the regular season, trade deadline. As it all occurs, we're going to talk about it all, because this signing, or lack thereof, could have a huge impact on the Mets and how they perform this year, or not really impact them at all. It really remains to be seen. And quite frankly, as much as you don't want to say this in the moment, I'm very excited to see how this plays out. I'm very excited to see how this entire situation develops. Whether it's good or bad for the Mets remains to be seen. If you guys have any other comments on the Correa situation, how it impacts baseball, the Mets, the NL East, the NL, the AL with the Twins, leave them below. I think from the Twins side of things, shifting away from just, it's all about the Mets, I think it's a great addition for them. I think they're a team that, is it great that they're taking the risk? Could they get burned by it? Probably, but he's kind of a centerpiece for them, like he was last year. And it makes the Twins a much more viable, quote-unquote, contender in the AL. Whereas, the Mets already have an 100-win roster for the most part. If you look at last year, adding Correa would have just put them over the top. So you have that bit of a difference there why, Minnesota could be more inclined to take on risk versus the Mets and Giants not wanting to take as much risk. Also, you have the fact that it's a 6-year deal versus a 12 or 13-year deal. These things all come into play and are all very important in how these things are looked at. So yeah, that's really all there is baseball talk wise. I mean, obviously have the Brian Reynolds rumblings. You obviously have the different things that could pop up, but there's just nothing concrete. All the big signings are past us. All the big trades are really past us for the most part. So it'll be very interesting to see how the remainder of the offseason shapes up, how things shape up heading into spring training, and how teams like the Mets, the Yankees that have spent big really look different compared to last year. So I'm very interested to see how that works, and it's going to be very exciting. And stay tuned to the City That Never Sleeps show for whatever comes next. That moves us on to basketball. And looking at the New York Knicks, their last game, they lost to the Milwaukee Bucks, which, they blew a lead. Not entirely great, but looking at the standings currently, the Knicks are a game behind the Pacers. They are 3 behind the Sixers. They are 4 behind the Cavs, and that's really the extent of what I would look at because it's going to be very tough for anyone to catch the Bucks, the Nets, the Celtics at the moment. The Heat are a game behind the Knicks. The Hawks are 2.5, and the Bulls are 3. And that really rounds out the play-in, playoff teams at the moment. The Knicks have been just this definition of up and down this season. 22-19, they're not as mid as they were in terms of, when I say mid, I mean like just middle ground. But, you look at how they played, right? You lose to the Mavericks on the 27th of December, right? You lose to the Spurs. You then dismantle the Rockets. You beat the Suns. You beat the Spurs. You beat the Raptors. Okay, 4-game winning streak. You then barely lose to the Bucks in a game where it probably should have been 5. Should have been a 5 straight. And, it's just this constant up and down. And then you have, for example, last night, Immanuel Quickley being benched. And why is Immanuel Quickley being benched? And it's just this constant, just roller coaster of up and downs where you can't ever truly get a full gauge on what this team's about. Looking at the game from last night, you got Julius Randle continuing his resurgent year, 25, 16, and 5, but he kind of disappeared down the stretch. You have Immanuel Quickley going for 23, yet he gets benched down the stretch. Jalen Brunson, the key cog for why the Knicks have been so good at times this year, having 44 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists. It's just very hard to win games when, you're getting 2 out of Mitchell Robinson, 4 out of Quentin Grimes, 3 out of Evan Fournier, 3 out of Miles McBride, 0 out of Isaiah Hartenstein in 10 minutes. So, it's just this up and down nature of this team, and there's I don't want to say crippling inconsistency, but this very damaging inconsistency this season where they've had their times where they've just been so on the money with everything, and then these times where, why are we losing these games? And it'll be very interesting to see how that develops over time. It'll be very interesting to see how heading past the month of January, how heading past, these games, how do the Knicks improve or not improve? So I'm very interested to see how that all plays out. And looking at the other New York team, the Brooklyn Nets, Kevin Durant now is dealing with a knee injury. Obviously not great, but the Nets are showing you why they should be considered one of the better teams. KD is a huge part of that, but you do have Kyrie. You are getting production from your bench with Seth Curry at times, TJ Warren, Ben Simmons being more of a facilitator, Royce O'Neal, Kyrie Irving stepping up and being huge, absolutely huge for this Brooklyn team, has been very important. Obviously, the coaching change to Jock Vaughn has been huge for this team. And quite frankly, with more depth than most people thought, with more production than most people thought, the Nets are in a very prime spot to be one of the best teams in the East, especially if they can withstand KD being out for 2 to 3 weeks. In looking at the rest of the NBA, in terms of standings, Celtics, Nets, Bucks, not surprised by anything there. Cavaliers, Sixers, not surprised by anything there. Pacers playing as good as they are, very surprised. But when you have a young team, these things are kind of expected at times. Looking at the Western Conference, Nuggets and Grizzlies playing at a very high level. So are the Pelicans and Mavericks. Kings and Warriors are locked into spots at the moment. And then, the Suns are slipping a little bit. The Timberwolves are slipping. The Blazers are slipping. The Jazz are slipping a little bit. And the Lakers are making a bit of a run for the play-in, despite not having AD. The Thunder aren't that far out. So looking at these two conferences, you have a bit more of parity in the West versus a bit more top heaviness in the East. And it'll be very interesting, especially as we approach the trade deadline closer to the All-Star game, in how, these things develop. It'll be very interesting to see how, my bad, just had to fix something there. Wasn't sure if my mic was still working. Just checking on that real quick. Yeah, so back to what I was saying. Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how the NBA season truly develops as we approach not the off season, but the middle of the season, the All-Star game, the trade deadline. Does a team like the Knicks make a move for a star? Or do they choose to add more depth and try to solidify what they have going for them with Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle? Do the Nets try to add another scorer to pair with Harden and Kyrie Irving, despite not having many picks or assets to work with? Does a team like the Celtics or the Bucks go after another option from maybe a team like the Raptors or the Magic? Does a team like the Wizards that are hovering between the range of going for play-in or tanking blow it up? Do they trade Bradley Beal? Are the Hawks in that same boat in the Western Conference, right? Do the Jazz fully commit to the tank? Do the Thunder commit to it? Do the Blazers commit to it? Do the Timberwolves try to recoup some assets? These are the type of questions that are going to pop up that will have a huge, huge, huge impact on, how the rest of the NBA season plays out. So I'm very interested to see how that impacts not just the NBA, but the New York teams specifically. And now to move on to hockey, looking at the Rangers right now and the Islanders as well. The New York Rangers are currently a point behind the Capitals and 2 points behind the Devils. The only teams they're behind in the Atlantic are the Maple Leafs and the Bruins. The Bruins have the most points in the East with 68. They currently are 32-4-4. Maple Leafs are 25-9-7. The Rangers are 22-12-7 behind the 23-14-6 of the Capitals, the 25-12-3 of the Devils, and the 25-8-7 of the Hurricanes. Rangers are much improved to where they were beforehand, creating some separation between themselves and the Penguins, the Islanders, and already the Flyers and Blue Jackets. Islanders playing better than they were earlier, or not earlier in the year, but as opposed to last season. But, they're still not at the level where in a very, very, very tight and competitive Metropolitan Division, even having a record of 22-17-2, they're behind the Penguins, Rangers, Capitals, Devils, and Hurricanes, as opposed to, the Atlantic Division having 46 points would put them in fourth place of that division and only be 3 points out, versus in the Metro, they are essentially six. They're essentially 5 points out at a minimum from the Rangers, who are still trying to catch up with the Capitals and Devils. It just shows that that division is very tightly compacted, very competitive. And yeah. So looking at some of the previous comments, I know Mad Bull was talking about some hockey. Pulling up some of the stuff from earlier. Talking about the Sabres versus a Kraken team. I'm assuming this is about some of the games for tonight. And then you're talking about Devils Hurricanes over. It's a great bounce back spot for the Hurricanes. And yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying here, Devils and Hurricanes. Devils are a very, very competitive team, and the Hurricanes are, once again, a very great team. So that I'm excited for that game. That should be a good one. You evidently have more hockey betting experience than I do. I have bet on a few things, but I haven't been as fully invested in the betting market for the NHL as I probably could. But, that kind of wraps up the NHL talk. So if you guys want to drop anything else in the comment section regarding, we talked earlier about the Giants winning a playoff game. I personally was on board with that. Whether you guys want to talk about Jets, anything NFL related, anything sports related, really, just leave it below and we can talk about it for, the remaining part of the show. If not, we'll get out of here in a little bit. So if anyone doesn't have anything to discuss, I'm going to talk about some NFL draft stuff for a little bit. Just go over a little bit of the draft order. The huge win, or whether you consider that a good or a bad thing by the Texans, kind of shook up the top of the draft a little bit. Obviously, you have Chicago, now followed by Houston, Arizona, Indy, and Seattle to round out the top 5. 6 through 10, you got the Lions with the Rams pick, Vegas, Atlanta, Carolina, and Philadelphia having New Orleans pick. And then rounding out the remaining teams that are not in the playoffs, you have the Titans, the Texans, Jets, the Patriots, Packers, Commanders, Steelers, and the Lions. It's a very intriguing draft order because, Chicago kind of holds all the cards now. In the rare event they want to stay at 1 and take a quarterback, they can. They have the pick of the litter, whether it's Stroud, whether it's Young, whether it's Levis. They can pick whoever they want at that spot. If they want a truly impactful defensive player, Jalen Carter or Will Anderson at that spot. If they want to trade out, the Colts, Vegas, Carolina, Atlanta, possibly the Lions could all trade up to that spot. Then you have the Texans, probably going quarterback. If it's the pick of the litter, they'll probably go Young or Stroud. If one of them is gone, they'll probably go with the one that hasn't been picked, or maybe even Levis. Cardinals, I think, are a lock for whatever one of Carter or Anderson has not been selected. I think the Colts are the third quarterback destination. Looking at Seattle and Detroit, I think Seattle's defense. I think Detroit is defense. Vegas is a wild card. Atlanta is a wild card. Carolina should be quarterback, but that's dependent on whether or not they trade up or not. And then looking at the last few selections in like the top 15, I think the Eagles are trench play, possibly corner. Titans has to be offensive line. Texans, best player available. Jets, I truly think is best player available, leaning more towards it being offensive line, but you never know there. Patriots, I think, should be a receiver. Green Bay, offensive weapon. Washington, wild card. Pittsburgh, best player available. And then Detroit, I think, best player available at a different position than what they did with their first selection. So personally, I'm very excited for the upcoming draft. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the different coaching hires, how the different shakeups with some certain teams affects how they approach the draft. But at the end of the day, there's a lot more football talk ahead of us. As I said, there's a lot more baseball talk ahead of us. There's a lot more sport talk ahead of us. And on that note, that brings us to the end of another episode of the City That Never Sleeps show. Thank you guys for joining us again. No, we didn't have our normal show last week and wanted to wrap up this show by saying once again, very happy to see the progress of Damar Hamlin. Nothing is as important as the health and safety of him in the sports world. Also prayers out to Peyton Hillis, who is in ICU, former Browns and Giants running back. You look at that type of stuff and it puts sports in perspective so much. You can be all hung up about, not winning this game, not making the playoffs, not this. But once you have situations like Damar Hamlin's, Peyton Hillis's, life gets put into perspective real fast. And those things don't matter as much, quite honestly. So on that note, thoughts and prayers out to those guys. Thoughts and prayers out to Hamlin and Hillis. We will be back next week with a playoff week 1 recap, the latest in the NFL news, MLB news if there's anything out there, and some nice hockey and basketball discussion. Thank you guys for joining me and Austin when he was here on another great show. It's been fun. It's been real. It's been real fun. We'll catch you next week.